All right. See, just like that. I say that all the time. I think when I start these darn things, but
Oh,
yeah, I'm pleased to be joined by Josh Flores of Comet Backup. Welcome.
thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're just comparing time zones and I'm saying my kids are uh, uh, coming home here shortly. I've texted him saying, "Hey, don't disturb Dad while he's doing his thing." And it's early hours of the day for you there, right?
Yeah, it's about 8 a.m. on a pretty wet Wednesday morning here in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll equal you. We've got a nice front coming through. So it's been gloomy and rainy, and I think that's the way it's going to be.
Mm,
Hopefully we'll get some sun. I guess we got DataCon coming up here next week, so hopefully we'll get a little Miami sun for a couple of days. We'll see. We will
pretty,
see.
pretty just that. We're supposed to be in summer at the moment, but it's not eventuating. So yeah.
Ah. Well, hey, us get into it. This is I think this would be a really interesting one. Just given that you've got a really interesting journey and background, and so I often like to start with kind of take us back to early Josh days. What was early Joshhood like?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so let's go right back. So I was actually born in Austin, Texas. But when I was very, very little, for family reasons, we actually moved over here back to Christchurch, New Zealand. So that's why I don't have any sort of accent or twang or anything like that. Um, Everybody still asks me about that. Why don't you have an accent? Well, I wasn't there long enough for that type of thing. Um, Growing up, yeah, just usual typical childhood, that type of thing. I always had an interest in computers and technology and that type of thing, starting when you get your first gaming console and really that type of thing. And so pretty uneventful times just growing up through school and things like that. Not necessarily a focus on technology or anything like that, just pretty broad. Um, After I left school, I did like what a lot of people sort of do, and they go, I'm going to try a whole bunch of different jobs and see what I like, what I don't like, and sort of figure it out, as opposed to immediately jumping into university and studying something and knowing whether or not I'd like it or not at the end of the degree. So I did a whole range of things, from web design and things like that through to doing logistics for food distribution company, in terms of ingoing and outgoing sea containers and what happens with regulatory compliance and all the little weird nuances around importing sea containers from overseas and things like that. Um, yeah, which is which, thinking back, is pretty far from where we are today in terms of that sort of journey. Um, and then I sort of got more into the IT space around, general web and managing websites and that type of thing. And actually, it got to a point sort of in my life, in sort of my mid-20s, where um, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a falling out with IT, but I felt like, hey, I want to do something different here. I've had enough of this. I'm going to do something else. So I actually went to university and ended up studying like environmental management and science. So like focusing on like water quality and how to, ensure that waterways are kept free of pollutants if you're doing farming next to them, and all sorts of things like that. And while I was a student at the time, like any good student, I needed to be able to afford to buy beer on the weekends and things like that. So I was looking around for various different jobs that were available part time for students, and I saw an advert working at an IT company, working in the help desk, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, I could do that with my eyes closed." And so the company I joined was the company that really started me on my journey in the backup space, and that was called Nexus Data Backup. And so that was one of the largest backup companies here in New Zealand. And so we were providing backup services to like medical centers and law firms and other professional organizations. And we were using a variety of different backup tools um, to provide these backups to these customers. I was working the help desk, understanding how backups worked, what were the disaster scenario situations, getting a real deep understanding of the software and that type of thing. Fast forward to finishing my degree, and it was like, well, I can move on and do something with my degree. And it was looking like the prospects were very boring work at the city council, essentially doing compliance checks for things like that.
Right.
Or, I could carry on full time working at Nexus. So carried on at Nexus and continued working in the backup space there, and a lot of different sort of roles and opportunities through that. Then sort of the next step is around 2010, we sold the backup business. But during that time that we had the backup business, we were using a whole bunch of different backup solutions. I think we had about 5 or 6 that we were sort of using, and they were all different. They all had their different ways of how they were doing reporting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult to monitor and manage them and understand like what was happening with backups. So we started a little project internally, creating a portal where you could link all the servers to. You'd have centralized management, reporting, and really just making it easier on a day-to-day basis to run a backup business. And so when we sold the backup business, we retained this little small internal portal tool that we had. And so we were like, hey, if we were a backup company using these technologies and this was super useful for us, and we had these challenges, other companies out there had to be experiencing these challenges.
Sure.
So yeah, we really commercialized the product, and we still manage and run that today, and that's called My Client. And so we launched that out there, and we grew that to hundreds of partners all over the globe that were using these different backup products, utilizing My Client for monitoring, management, that type of thing. And this was a very interesting time for us, because we've sort of gone to being the end user of this sort of these backup software, to now being somebody that works purely on an integration level utilizing the software. So we would have to work through their APIs, how they did it, update it from our end. But also we were getting really interesting connections with MSPs and IT providers all over the globe, hearing really deeply about it in the different countries and how it was working with them. We were seeing a lot of trends with the software and the types of features and functionality people were coming out with. And yeah, it was an interesting time initially for us getting into that, but it further got more interesting, I suppose, as we went on, where people were coming to us and going, hey, we would really love if our backup solution was able to do X or Y. Is there any way that you can sort of like custom build that into your solution, that it will do it for us? And we're like, okay, that's a little bit weird, but we can sort of do that. And we were starting to do like more and more like very specific backup customization, until it sort of got to the point where we were like, hey, maybe there's something here. Maybe there is the opportunity for a new backup vendor in the MSP space. And like any good business, you need to have essentially, the foundations for do this. Like we had domain knowledge of the backup industry through our previous experience running backups. We had really good technical understanding at a deep level about how backups work, their interactions. We had our own development talent itself. And we actually had a customer base that on day one, if we were to build a backup solution, that we could market to on day one and be like, you knew us from the monitoring tool, now build our own solution. So it seemed like it was a really interesting opportunity for us. And, we've got a real appetite over here for, really giving things a go and really getting after it. So we decided, let's actually start internally building something out to see if we can, make a proof of concept around backup. And so for the longest time, around 2015, when we started looking at building the backup solution, we internally called it HBP. And HBP stood for hypothetical backup product, because we didn't know if we could validate whether or not we'd actually be able to have a backup product or not. So that's for the longest time that it was labeled internally. So we're like, hey, we can see that this is working. This is quite cool what we can do with the technology. And then really from after that, it sort of just snowballed when once we had it, we reached out to partners and people that we knew from all over the globe to say, hey, do you want to try out a new solution and things like that? And then really just around about 2017, we're like at the point where it's like any good product, it's like you could forever be stuck, trying to build, one more feature and then we'll launch. But we were like, nah, we're ready here. Let's actually do that. So
you had
early 2017, that's when we launched Comet, and so that's sort of my journey from it. But I would just sort of say, looking back now, I've had more than 10 years in the backup space in various different, roles and sort of segments in it and that type of thing. So, yeah.
So you had the HMVP, the hypothetical minimum
Hypothetical
viable
backup
product.
product.
Yeah, minimum viable backup product.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
HMVBP. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a cute name, but we didn't think it would be catchy if we were going to launch it as a product. Obviously, we wanted something, and like everything, I have to say, trying to figure out a name for a product is probably one of the longest and arduous journeys.
Yeah,
How
it's
many?
you pick a name and then you second guess it, and then yeah. Worst thing is opening that up to committee because everyone's got an opinion, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was endless whiteboarding sessions around ideas and things like that. But ultimately, we decided on Comet because we felt that we just wanted to do, like a lot of things we do, we just wanted to do, something that was a little bit different. We were looking at the industry, and they they were very industry, I'd say, specific sounding names and things like that that often use the word like backup or data in them or protection or something like that. And we're like, we want to do something a little bit different, and that we can have a little bit of personality with and be a little bit memorable. And so that's sort of why we ultimately went with Comet and our space theme and things like that, just being something a bit different and be able to have a bit of fun with marketing and branding.
No, it definitely gives you a lot of different directions to go, and it's definitely memorable. So, yeah, that's probably an interesting case study down the line. But so,
Yeah.
so what were some of the challenges? Right, you've gone from kind of this kind of monitoring kind of world,
Mm,
and this second product, and there's obviously an opportunity, and you're kind of solving a pain point
mm,
that you had
mm.
previously with 5 different solutions and what have you. But what were some of the challenges in that second product launch, that second wave?
Yeah. I and it's still to this day, a large part of our business is actually just, I would describe it as like really hardcore R&D,
Mm.
where you're trying to figure out how to back up data from somewhere to something else. And often there's not very good documentation. A lot of it is very trial and error. And a lot of it is, you can't exactly look and see a blueprint of just do it this way and follow it. You have to figure out your own unique ways. So a lot of our challenges in the early days was figuring out, really deeply how, Windows handles file systems and things like that. And it's the same, when you look at Mac and things like that. It's just really, really deep understandings of knowledge of this works, this doesn't, but if you do this, something else is going to happen. So that was probably, the biggest challenges in the early days was working through and figuring out not only how can you do it, which is great, but then also how can you actually do it really quickly or really efficiently, because there's, very slow ways and very fast ways. And, you know, it's a little bit of the fun too, because you're making this up as you go. It's sort of a blank canvas going, cool, let's do this, let's try something else. So yeah, it was really the challenge of working through and understanding the different file things, but also just everything that goes into, hey, let's take this crazy idea of building a new backup solution and sort of commercialize it, and what do we need, and all the other steps around it and things like that. So um, yeah, so the short answer, really, really deep engineering understanding of operatings and file systems and things like that.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially you launched at a time where backup had been around for a while, but that was probably we got at the beginning of the golden age of backup, right? Because then you had a lot of different groups emerging onto the scene. And to your point, especially in the MSP space,
Mm,
you might have an MSP that started out as an XYZ backup fan, and then they inherited a customer that was serviced by another MSP, and they had something
mhm,
else, and then you get a dental practice down the road, and they've got a backup that you may never have heard of, right? And so you're
mm.
you're you're stepping into almost like an integration quagmire, probably at times. It probably felt like that.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely was sort of all over the place, and trying to find what are some of the common things in the industry that we should do, and where can we be a bit different and things like that, and what are the base level of things that people need to ensure that we meet the needs, and we're not just building far out functionality that we think people need but they might not necessarily need. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you're building, you're spending X amount of time building one specific swim lane, and then
Mm.
might be solving a challenge, but is it commercially viable? Is it something that's going to be, replicable across, multiple customers, and, you're going to get scale out of that specific, swim lane? And so those are always the early days, especially the early days, trying to figure out, the product maturity, where to focus, I think a lot of vendors suffer from this, and a lot of MSPs suffer from this as well, but there's so many opportunities to solve so many problems that you have to be disciplined in picking the right problems to solve. You want to solve them all, and at times you don't want to leave revenue on the table, but you have to be pretty choosy at times, especially early days of startup.
Absolutely, and that's something that we really have. Like, we have a singular focus on just building really good backup software, and we could go all different directions and go, hey, what works really well with backup software? Wouldn't it be great if we built our own RMM to go with it? Or wouldn't it be good if we also built like AV software and things like that? That's not the direction that we look at. Our focus is just on backup. Yeah, there's probably other opportunities for those types of things, but you have to look at those opportunities as an entirely new, almost business in itself if you were to build a product like that, because you have to build it, you have to understand the expertise and how to go through it. And in some respects, I think you can very easily lose your focus on what you actually originally started doing, and perhaps even neglect that because you're chasing, something new or something different or things like that. And so, yeah, there's been plenty of opportunities over the years where we could do, things a little bit more outside of our lane, but it's not an interest for us. Our interest really is purely on the backup space, because there is so much to it. And, as much as we learn and understand and have, unique insights into how things work and how to back up data, there's always way more that we can do. And we see that, there's so much opportunity still there for backup itself.
Yeah. At the rate of data acceleration and, just how, you hear all these stats about, data quadrupling now every 6 months, every 3 months. It's going to be, pretty soon every day, I guess. But I guess, how does that stretch you guys? Are there technical limitations? Are there barriers that you hit your head against the wall and you're still trying to break through, or
yeah. Oh, there's tons of stuff. There's tons of stuff. I think, we'll put it this way, in a very unique way. One of the challenges that we have, and I think a lot of vendors will have, is that people take your application and they use it in different environments. And so, for one thing, we can't test every sort of situation an MSP might utilize their product in the wild. As much as we try to do it, they will do things differently. And they will use it on various degrees of hardware. Some of it, really excellent specs. Some of it, not so great specs. Yeah. And so trying to make stuff that scales and works on these things. And sometimes it's a situation where they're like, look, I need to back up this client. They've got a significant amount of data, but they have very crappy internet. What can you guys do to, help in that situation? Or how was the software handle it? So we have to take a lot of consideration around, the different, types of accessibility to, I suppose, power and internet speed and things like that, and factor that into how we're doing it. Because there's no good saying, yeah, you can use Comet, you can use it on your solution, but it's going to take, 18 years to do its first backup because the internet's so slow or something like that. So we have to work around it. And, there's more variables to it, because there's obviously the variables with the operating system, but then there's the variables about how it's deployed and things like that, and how it interacts with other pieces of software and things like that going on there. And certainly, with more and more data sizes, data sets getting bigger and things like that, finding ways that we can, really optimize things, make it you store less data because it's being more efficient, or how it transmits data, that it's only transmitting data that absolutely needs to, is something that we're, continuously monitoring and focusing on. But, I think the utopian dream is that everybody has high-speed internet everywhere in the world, and we never have issues with, slow internet.
Yeah. Maybe in some ways, this might be too much of an assumption, but in some ways, again, a lot of legacy kind of traditional backup, on-prem backup vendors, they went to, cloud and kind of this hybrid kicking and screaming. Eventually they got pushed in that direction, but you kind of came in and were a place where, at a time probably where it was either cloud first, or you had to have at least a kind of
Mm,
architecture that led to on-prem and cloud, right?
mm.
And I imagine that was pretty novel relative to some of the legacy groups out there.
Yeah, yeah. When we first launched, cloud was really sort of starting to take off and things like that, and really becoming quite interesting and viable for a lot of people. When we actually launched Comet at the start, we only had an option that you could host it yourself. You'd install it on
Mm-hmm.
your own server or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the cloud provided sort of two opportunities for us. One opportunity was that, hey, we could provide a fully managed hosted Comet server for the customer
Right.
in the cloud. Don't have to worry about servers, maintenance, that type of thing. We can host it, run it for you. The other thing from the product side is we're like, this is also the easiest path for a customer if they would like to try out the solution, because you don't need to go, cool, I'm going to download Comet. I need to find some hardware that I can provision it on. Maybe I need to, get permission to install an application to test it from another department or something like that. And so we really utilized it to, build our hosted Comet option to have accessibility for those two things for people. And it's really sort of taken off. There seems to be, it's very interesting looking at our stats internally over like who's using what, like self-hosted versus cloud hosted and things like that. Cloud hosted and people that are coming in and going, look, I don't want to be at night, thinking, is my server going to fall over, or waiting for some, midnight alerting to tell me that I've got an issue for me to resolve.
Right.
I just want, that to run for me in the cloud and things like that. Absolutely. But then there is a smaller group of people that I'd say that it's still a main requirement for them. And these are often people that have got very, very specific circumstances. Like if they've got a company or an organization policy that they have to host the software themselves for security reasons, compliant reasons, governmental reasons. Sure, absolutely. There'll always be that sort of need in that sector of customers. But definitely, people looking at the cloud and going, look, this makes my life easier. My techs don't have to manage stuff. I don't need to go out and buy more hard drives for my server or provision more space and things like that. It's great. So yeah, I think it's been a real boon for the backup industry and people in general.
Yeah. So what, if you had to look forward, right? What's this look like? A year, 2 years? Let's go 3 years, right? Three to 5 years, right? You've seen how rapid technology's evolved, and you've seen kind of this acceleration, especially because
Mm,
there's now almost no concept of perimeter, and just all
mm,
these technologies have evolved so super fast. And I imagine
mm.
we'll continue that more, or that acceleration. But what do you look like in 3 years? What's this industry look like?
Yeah, I think and we're already seeing it now. As there is a real push for, everything by default is being backed up to the cloud. The latest versions of Windows, basically, strong arms you just storing stuff on OneDrive,
Right.
and everything basically doesn't store something locally. It just has a cloud copy and things like that. I think there'll be more and more of that type of thing. But the interesting part with that is often the companies that do provide that cloud first storage, and that's the only option, is they've got they because the data is expanding so rapidly. They have to put some sort of constraints on it, unless you're a massive enterprise like Microsoft or things like that. And so where I think it will be interesting is, yes, it'll be more in that no data locally, everything in the cloud. But we're often seeing it's kind of restrained by how long they will allow data to sit there for. So there's certain products out there. It's like, yep, all your data is stored in our data center, but we will only keep the last 90 days of records or things like that.
Mm,
And so if you're a business that goes, or a law firm, for example, they often need years of
yeah.
documentation for compliance reasons. So this is where, backup will have to evolve, not only to be, pure cloud to cloud, that we can move data from, one data center to another, purely in the cloud, hands off from the customer, but also looking at ways that we can ensure that we can, back up and protect data for people that have those longer, data periods and things like that, and handle obviously significant amounts of data. Um, so I think that's sort of where it's going to go. I can already see the challenges for a lot of this, and we're already sort of seeing it now with some things that we're playing around with in the background, and that is there's still quite a big cost often if you're trying to take data out of one data center or one storage location and then migrate it and move it to another. You've got often huge bandwidth charges, different charges and things like that associated with it. And so a lot of it is trying to work through is, do we just eat the cost? Do we find a way to pass it on? Can we work with them to find it to do some sort of agreement and things like that? So it's still a very sort of evolving sort of industry, I think, until we start to see changes or maybe even standardization of ingress and egress costs for data and things like that.
Yeah. So MSP comes to you, and what does the engagement typically look like? How involved is your team? Is it? I know, I think one of the beautiful things is that there's a kind of a free kind of version, get started. But MSP that's looking for support, it's got kind of challenging scenarios. I mean, I assume you guys are pretty proactive with them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we did when we launched Comet is we were like, look, we actually want to make this really accessible for MSPs if they just want to sign up and get started. One of the things that I think the IT industry in general hates is, hey, you want to try this piece of software? It looks really cool. You got to speak to sales first. And you got to get stuck in some sort of conversation backwards and forwards with the demo before you can even play with it. So we were like, look, first of all, let's make it really easy that people can just sign up, play with the software and things like that. And so that's really where it starts, that people can sign up, they can use the software, they can engage with us. We'll obviously reach out with them, help them to understand their needs, help them use the software, customize it, whatever to fit their needs. There's a group of customers, and you'd call them the best customers in the world, that actually don't contact us. They go right from, a trial customer to, to converting. Those guys are great, but then, they're absolutely, we get a lot of inquiries from businesses coming, look, we need to protect this customer. They've got these very specific requirements and circumstances. And so, we spend a lot of time to work with them about how they can do it, the considerations from their end, providing training for people that use the product in their teams and how to understand it. And really just trying to educate people on how to use backup, because MSPs are busy. They're doing lots of things. They're often providing backup might not necessarily be for all of their customers, for some of them. So ensuring that they understand, not only how to use it, but ensure that backups will, operate successfully and things like that is, some of the key things that we really focus on with the people that come to us.
Yeah, look, I mean, I was going through the kind of your integrations, and so you've got a pretty broad set. I saw integrations into our friends over at Gradient. I think I saw that one on there as well.
Yep. Good old Gradient. It's always one of those things. You want to make it really easy for customers to use your software, understand usage, and be able to, build customers and things like that, because you're not only providing IT services, you're also often running a business, and part of the business is you need to figure out how much to charge your customers and things like that. And so, we've got a fantastic integration with Gradient and a whole bunch of things with other people. And a lot of the integrations there are companies that we love working with, because they're very friendly with the channel. They've got good engagement, and it's often, things that our partner base has come to us and said, hey, have you guys considered an integration with these guys? We're hearing a lot of really good things about them. They've got some very cool stuff for MSPs. So having a really wide range of options for the users of Comet is something that, we're really passionate about.
Yeah, no, I think giving them that choice, that flexibility, and then the way you guys have built this model, this program, I think makes a ton of sense. So moving forward, we've seen it. I think I absolutely agree with you, right? I think you're definitely seeing this rise of because of data explosion, and they say the cost is, I mean, it's going up incrementally as well, right? Just because of how much data out there, and so your ability to augment kind of the limitations that a lot of these native OEMs are putting in place is I think a massive opportunity for the MSPs. And then the way you guys are approaching integrations, I think is pretty smart as well, because it's giving the channel the choice. It's certainly the technologies that they need to work with, they want to work with. So So well done to you on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. That
yeah.
giving them the choice really um, is good. It's necessary. We saw this, that people need to have choice. We didn't want to build a backup solution, be like, cool, you use Comet, you have to use this storage
Mhm.
from this provider, or you have to use
Right.
our own, and you have to do these things in these different ways. Everything, like an MSP's, toolbox normally, they use a variety of different tools and solutions to, get the job done. And it was the same with backup, that, we want you to be able to use what you want and back up whatever you want, and not try and force your business to conform with how we think you should be doing backup, but the other way around, going, look, you can take Comet and you can fit it in around what you want to do and how you want to do it. Because there's nothing, I don't think there's any real benefit to locking, MSPs or users into very specific ways, because it's just going to be very difficult for them to adopt and do it. And I have to use that product, and I can only use it in that circumstance. You need to be a bit universal, because MSPs are a bit universal.
Yeah.
They'll hear a problem, or they'll see, you know, some unique circumstance with a customer, and then they'll figure out a way, and they'll find a solution to, provide or fix that gap for their customers. So we wanted to be doing something similar thing.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it right. That's for sure. So what's the best way to get a hold of you and the company? If I'm a MSP, I want to go out there and trial and.
Yeah, absolutely. So just cometbackup.com, free 30-day trial. We're not going to harass you, or, call you 50 times a day trying to contact you. We'll send you an email outreach. Here's our calendar if you want to get in touch, anything to do to help. But yeah, other than that, hello@cometbackup.com, or feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk with MSPs and, walk through and understand your requirements and needs.
Yeah, well, look, you put a post out there. I think you were messing around with Chat GPT maybe this time last year. And I think you got, was it Christmas Carol or something like that? And you said you weren't going to sing it. So maybe we'll try to rally the old internet to force you to sing the lyrics to that Chat GPT.
Maybe we'll do that one the next time we chat.
Okay. All right. I'm going to hold you to that. So,
Awesome.
well, look, hey, it's been great. I really appreciate you taking time, and we'll direct people in the show notes. Check you guys out, and yeah, appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Kevin.